Shabbat Shalom. I am in part 2 of our message we started last week, our need for community. I want to say that, being 60 years old, I know I look so much younger. Being 60, I've got some traction in life. I've got some life experiences. I can look back now on my life and be able to measure choices that I've made in alignment with the Word of God or out of alignment with the Word of God. And I can say what most of you also have experienced, that God's Word is true. It actually is real. And we can test the Word and experience the reality of what He has spoken in His Word. That which, connects the blessings or the curses in our lives. God says, I'm faithful. I'm so faithful. And for those that are in the covenant, there's blessings and cursings. And I use them both to raise you up and to keep you on the path. Even the curse is designed to bring you in alignment with His ways because He seeks to bless you and to bless your life. And so when we're in alignment with the Word, after a while, the blessings start to flood in, right? And we always have persecution. We always have some trials. That's true. But that without any blessing can be overwhelming. So the blessings of God come in. They sustain us. They give us hope and help us to experience the reality of God in our lives. When we get off track and we begin to, go our own ways and we disobey the ways of God, we beckon the curses. It's like whistling for the curses, waving a red flag at the bull and getting his attention, right? And God just determines when those curses are released and the intensity. But we're the ones that call them. He's not sending them. We're calling them forth. And those curses come, they buffet us, and they diminish our lives, and they get our attention. They're designed to bring us back through humility to the ways of God. And that's how it works. God says, I'm faithful to bring about the blessings and the cursings, to safeguard your futures. So this is very important for us to understand. If we want a life that's filled with meaning and purpose and blessing, we've got to come in alignment with His ways. And His ways are really super basic. Okay? They're not complicated. They might be challenging to implement, but they're pretty basic, pretty easy. And sometimes we overlook all those basic things, those easy things. And we think, well, in order to have a successful life and a prosperous life, we got to do all this kind of stuff, and it's really complicated, and it takes all these factors and so forth. And we kind of strive for that, only to find out that the blessing and the prosperity and the happiness that we are seeking is very elusive. It slips away at times, kind of comes and goes. And I want to bring us back to our attention to the idea that, as basic as God's ways are, as simple as they are, they're easy to kind of excuse and think, no, they're not really going to have that big of impact in my life. I want to say, no, they have a big impact in your life, a huge impact in your life. So I'm talking about some basic things today. One of those is community. It's amazing how community actually is the building blocks of that prosperity, that meaning and purpose we desire, and that happiness that we all seek for. Community is an essential part of that path. If you go out and try to attain all this stuff on your own, you'll never make it. Behind every person that has done great things is a community that actually helped them to accomplish that. It seems so basic, but yet it's so essential. So I want to pick up part 2 of community and talk about how God has designed community to meet some human needs related to meaning and purpose that fuels the prosperity that we all desire. So God is someone who, deeply desires relationship and community. We saw this last week. He previously created spiritual children, these immortal divine beings that He calls the sons of God, the children of God, really. And a more accurate translation, the children of God. They are the Elohim, gods with the small g, who serve the living God in the heavenlies. And then God says, you know what? I've got a new venture. I'm going to create man in our image. Let's create human beings in the dimension of the natural world, right? So he makes us in his image. And we too, because we have his image, his likeness, we desire relationship. We yearn for community. We yearn to be known and to know. This is who we are in God. We want connection with each other. We want connection with God. We want connection with our spiritual siblings, the Elohim, if you will. That's why everyone's preoccupied with spirituality in America. You go to the university, you'll never hear anything, you know? But as soon as they check out and leave the university, even the PhDs, they're off and seeking an experience of the divine. This whole aspect of the divine realm has captured the interest of every human being around the globe. It's everywhere. So, God has provided to meet our longings for true spirituality. And he's done that through the ecclesia, through the congregation, through the church that he's established, those whom he saved out of Egypt, right? Israel and the mixed multitude. That was the ecclesia of the day, birthed at Sinai under Moses by God himself. And he gave them a law. He gave them Torah. He gave them instructions by which they would govern their lives, how they would live together, how they would work together, how they would start businesses, how they would have kids, how they would raise their kids. I mean, every aspect of human experience, the Torah informs us how to live our lives. And even though Israel, and that intent, of course, was to bring blessing and prosperity into their lives. And even though Israel, his ecclesia, you know, his church, even though they fell into apostasy, he did not reject them. But rather, he sent Jesus, Yeshua HaMashiach. He sent Jesus to save and to build up Israel, who had fallen away in apostasy. So he came to build her up, Israel, his ecclesia, his church. You know, I was just at Denver Seminary, went to the seminar, the Jewish Jesus. Only made the first night because the snow was so bad. And then it snowed the next day, and I'm up in Brighton, you know, it's I-25, US 85. I thought, you know what, we're not going to go out. I almost left, but my wife and daughter said, don't go, it's not worth it. You know, there's a lot of car wrecks and just bad winter conditions. But that first night I was there, it was amazing. It was just amazing sitting there listening in this great seminary with some of the theologians, scholars that are riding the crest of the wave of what we call the new Pauline perspective, this idea that we need to understand the scriptures within their original contexts. You know, the church is so, how would you put it, so strong in their belief that they've replaced Israel, that they've just kind of got this disconnect going on. And listening to them talk about actually Jesus was Jewish and we're grafted into this Jewish roots of our faith, so to speak, was just like so refreshing to hear. And yet it's still pretty new even for the presenters. They kind of stumbled around a little bit in terms of connecting those dots, you know, but I was excited to see that. Israel is the church. She's always been the church. She always will be the church. Jesus came to build her up, and the Gentiles get grafted into her, and we get to participate with Israel as the people of God, as the nations are invited into this great salvation, which is to the Jew first and also to the Gentile. It's a great work that's going on. I'm so excited about it. So, that being stated, the Gentiles have come in like a mighty flood for almost 2,000 years now, and they comprise with believing Jews the church of Messiah. Today, what I want to do is I want to talk about that ecclesia as a faith community. So let's go back. Let's go back to Acts chapter 2, and let's look at what Jesus is doing and the elements that comprise that faith community. Acts chapter 2, verses 46 through 47. This is early after Pentecost, when the church is experiencing revival, if you will. Thousands and thousands of Jewish believers have come in. There will be a culmination of myriads of priests, Jewish priests, who embrace Jesus as the Messiah, who become the very basis of this new movement of Messianic Judaism, the Judaism of Messiah, his plan of salvation. And so this whole thing's beginning to build. And of course, the Gentiles are going to come in like a flood. Okay, but this is early on. It says, and day by day, speaking of these believers in Jesus right after Pentecost, day by day attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. These believers, these followers of Jesus, they were coming together as a community. They were experiencing community. They came together at the temple. This is in Jerusalem. So they gathered together at the appointed times. Everyone's gathered together in the temple. Most didn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah, but a minority, a strong minority, did. And those that did were gathered there at the appointed times in the temple to fellowship, to relate to one another, to build solidarity in their newfound faith. So this whole issue of community begins to take place because they're gathering together. The temple as a physical location of the gathering of those who believed. And also the home, the second place where they gathered. In the temple and in the home. At the appointed times corporately, and outside of those, within the home at other times. And in the home, what they did is they shared meals together and built relationships. They already had shared beliefs and shared values. And now this mission to go and take the glory of Yeshua to the nation was another dynamic that was actually bringing them together. So let's look at the four components of life-giving, a life-giving local Messianic community. These four elements are core elements. They're going to be found in every Messianic community. And if they're missing any of the four, they're going to kind of be in limp mode. These are the four, really essential ones. And you can add some others that will actually even take these communities farther and deeper. But these are the beginning places, if you will. Acts chapter 2:42 says, and they, the believers, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. So here's the four components. The four components to church community are being devoted and committed to, number one, the apostles' teaching. Number two, the fellowship, participating through service. They were committed to the fellowship, not fellowshipping. They were committed to the fellowship. What fellowship? That which was already established by their joining together at the appointed times. They were committed to that and to serving one another. Number three, they were committed to sharing meals together. I'll tell you what, relationships happen over meals. More than any other activity, meals are the most common place where you build relationships. You grow via calories, and you also grow via relationship over those calories. And so, sharing meals is an important part of a healthy community. If all we ever do is come here at the appointed times, we're not going to be a healthy community. We're going to have to get into each other's homes, invite each other over, clear our schedules, and have some times in which we share some meals together. That's what takes us deeper and deeper and deeper. I was just at a home just recently where we hung some mezuzahs, and We shared a meal, had some dessert, and just talked and laughed and blessed and prayed. It was a deeply spiritual experience. It was amazing in every way. We got to think through that. That doesn't happen on its own. It happens because we're committed to making it happen. So I'll talk more about that later. The final thing is prayer. Prayer is essential to any community. Prayer is so important. Prayer changes things. When you pray in faith, you engage the heavenly to move on earth the will of God. So important. We take that for granted. We don't understand the power of our words. We don't understand the power of asking God for what his will is in our lives. God is very invested in bringing about his will on earth as it is in heaven. And when we pray, we engage that. It's an amazing thing. So those are the four principal components of a local church. So let's unpack those a little bit more. Let's take the first one. Devoted to the apostles' teaching. Now, the main difference between Messianic Judaism and all other Judaisms is that we only have one rabbi. We only have one rabbi. So probably a decade ago, there was a big push in evangelical circles for every church to get a rabbi they could relate to and have that rabbi help inform them about the roots of their faith. And so everyone was going around, and in Judaism, rabbinic forms of Judaism, everyone has a rabbi. And the rabbi basically sets the tone for the halacha in his community. So whatever questions you might have on how you live your life as a Jew, you go to your local rabbi. You don't go to another rabbi, you go to your local rabbi. That local rabbi has jurisdiction and authority over his community, right? And everyone talks about their rabbis, and then they quote the rabbis and the writings of the rabbis. And of course, the earlier you can go, the more authority there is. And so that whole thing's wrapped around these spiritual leaders within Judaism called rabbis. So our Judaism is different in this sense. We only have one rabbi, Yeshua the Messiah. He is our only rabbi. In fact, he said, don't even call yourselves rabbi. You know, he's like the teacher. He's the rabbi. We defer everyone to him. He's the one that holds the key to understanding Moses. Now, think about this. Jesus didn't come to start a church. The church was already in existence, fallen away into apostasy, but started long, long ago. Jesus didn't come and start a new religion. Jesus, the Jew from Nazareth, had Jewish disciples and claimed to have his own yoke. Now, a yoke, he said, remember he said, come to me, you who are heavy and burdened, heavy laden and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Yeah, see, to the Gentile ear, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But to the Jewish ear, it made perfect sense. Every Judaism in the first century had a yoke. A yoke is the prioritization of all the commandments in priority, the weightier to the lighter, and then how to apply those in your life. And every Judaism had its own prioritization called a yoke. So if you were part of the Pharisees, you followed theirs. There was 26 subsets of Pharisaical Judaism with under the big umbrella of Pharisaical Judaism. And they all had their yokes. And the Sadducees, they had their yoke. The Essene community had its yoke. The Philoshes had their yoke. And then this Jew from Nazareth, who claimed to be the Messiah, said, I've got a yoke too. And if you find that the yoke that's on you is heavy and burdensome, come to me. Look at my yoke. I've prioritized the Torah. These are the weightier issues. These are the lighter issues. And I'm a gentle teacher, full of grace. Take my yoke upon yourself, and you'll find rest for your souls. Yeah, Jesus wasn't starting a new religion. He claimed to fulfill the religion given to Moses. He came to fulfill the Torah. He's a gentle, amazing, insightful rabbi. I would say the rabbi of rabbis. Who's your rabbi? The Messiah. I like that. My rabbi is the Messiah. Who's your rabbi, right? So this becomes a very important issue for us when we look at the roots of our faith, and that Jesus is, in fact, our rabbi. Now, all the other Judaisms focus on the teachings of their rabbis, just like we focus on the teachings of our rabbi. So what do you study when you study Torah? What are the commentaries you look through? What are the books that you use to help you understand the passages that are before you? See, I'll tell you, in this movement, we have people, they just clamor. They make the mistake, the classic mistake of thinking the roots of our faith are rabbinic forms of Judaism. That's not true. The roots of our faith are Messiah, his Judaism. That's the roots of our faith. You can study the Talmud. You can find any position you want in the Talmud. It's amazing how wide and developed and diverse the writings of the rabbis are. But I want to tell you a secret. Our Talmud is the apostolic scriptures. That's what we're called to study. It says they were devoted to whose teachings? The apostles' teachings. Not the teachings of the rabbis, not the Mishnah, not the oral traditions. They were committed to the apostles' teachings, what Christians would call the New Testament. This is what they were devoted to. This is what they studied. Think about it. Jesus is the Messiah. If we want to understand the words of Moses, we need to understand his words. He's the one that came to clarify and interpret the Torah and to teach us how to apply it to our lives. So when I look at how to keep Torah, I don't go to the rabbis. I'm not saying that the rabbis, I'm not saying that the rabbis' views are in any way negative. They're just not mine. They're different than mine. I go to Messiah. I'm saying, Rabbi Jesus, how do I keep the Torah? I think he knows how to keep the Torah. He's the one that wrote it. So I think he would be the one that would tell us how to keep it. So the thing that made Messianic Judaism unique in the first century is they devoted themselves to the teachings of the apostles. I've watched people come into Rabbinic Judaism or to Messianic Judaism and get enthralled with the Talmud and other commentaries and rabbinic forms of Judaism and slowly make their way into those and then turn their backs on Jesus. Almost every time, because that's the end of the road. All rabbinic Judaisms claim to be the true Judaism. In fact, they fight a lot with each other, except when it comes to Jesus. He's the great uniter of all Judaisms. They all come together in solidarity and proclaim he is not the Messiah. It's interesting. Yeah. So I think it's important for us not to fall into those traps. We are to follow the halacha of our Messiah, of our rabbi. And that's found in the apostolic scriptures. So what would be the application? If you want to be a healthy, well-balanced Messianic believer, whether you're a Gentile or a Jew, you need to spend time in the apostolic scriptures. If you want to understand Moses, you got to understand him through the lens of Messiah and his apostles. That's how you're going to discern the important parts, the weightier and lighter issues, and how to walk that out. So I want to encourage you in application, 30 minutes a day. I want to challenge you to do that. 30 minutes a day, every day, spending in the apostolic scriptures and learning from the apostles' teachings. We need to devote ourselves, like they did, to the teachings of the apostles. They were thoroughly Jewish, and they understood the mystery of the gospel and the inclusion of the Gentiles. And that's our Judaism. That is the plan of salvation. That is what Messiah has given us. So I want to encourage you to do that, 30 minutes a day. All right, number 2, they were devoted to the fellowship. So the community of faith, they came together, and they met in different locations, of course. They met in the temple, which really corresponds to a geographical location, if you will, and also the home. And you'll find that they're meeting in the temple and in the synagogue at the appointed times. Because the appointed times is the time that you gather together collectively. It's not only a day of rest, it's a day of assembly. You're commanded to come together at the appointed times. That's when you gather for worship. I often say over and over and over, had the church not forsaken her Jewish roots, we would have no division between Jews and Gentiles. But because of the division, we miss each other every week. Some meet on Shabbat, some meet on Sunday. Then we miss each other for all the annual festivals, because what God gave his people are a different calendar than what the Gentiles replaced it with. So all year long, we miss each other as well. This great division is unnecessary. I believe the Gentiles being grafted back into Israel and re-embracing what God already gave concerning the appointed times creates healthy communities of Jews and Gentiles together in Messiah, representing that new humanity that's born again in and through the grace of God that comes to us through Messiah. So we too need to be devoted to the fellowship. We need to commit ourselves to being here at the appointed times, the annual holy days and the weekly Shabbat. Now, I know that's not easy. How many employers understand that you need to have the Shabbat off? Right? Unless you're working for a Jewish person, you know? But your employers don't understand that, and they're going to be sometimes like Pharaoh and demand that you work on Shabbat. And if you say no, you'll miss promotions and sometimes you'll lose a job. So I get how hard that is. It takes a lot of faith to say, no, I'm going to keep Shabbat. I'm going to be here even if my employer fires me. Now, there are exceptions to the rule: law enforcement, hospitals, and the military. Anyone that's involved in those career paths are exempt because they fall in alignment with the Shabbat. They protect human life. And so those would be the exceptions. But if you're working outside of those in a different career path where you could take Sabbath off, then really you're called to keep Shabbat. And that employer may really hassle you and even fire you. And, so it's a faith walk. But I want to tell you right now, there's so many laws that protect you, it's unbelievable. And most of them will never get away with that. And when you stand your ground, most of them are not going to fire you. And if they do, you can sue them and get your job back or get a settlement most of the time. So I want to tell you, God, when you honor God and say, you know what, I'm going to tell my employer I can't work on Shabbat anymore. When you're ready, you got to have faith to do that. If you're not ready, it's okay. Keep doing what you're doing. You grow into this. It's a faith walk, right? And so it takes time. But I want to encourage you, when you get to that place where you're ready to say, you know what, this is more important. I'm going to trust God. He's my provider. And you make these moves, God will see you through. The reason it's so hard is there's an enemy that will do everything he can through every institution in society to keep you from walking in the commandments of God. And it's those commandments that bring enormous blessing to your life. I've seen that over and over and over. So I want to encourage you to consider that and continue to work towards that, and know that half a loaf is better than no loaf. What do I mean by that? Well, if you can only make 2 Shabbats a month, half a loaf is better than no loaf, right? If you can only come for a part of the service, half a loaf is better than no loaf. If you can only come once a month, half a loaf is better than no loaf. Our commitment to you as a community is that we're going to continue to pray for you, for blessing, for faith, and for provision, to be able to step forward and say, I'm walking in the ways of God, that God would lead you more fully into that. So every week on Shabbat is an appointed time. And you can meet outside of that, of course, for other times that are not appointed. Bible studies, fellowship, prayer times, ministry, relationship, those are all other times that you can meet together. But at the appointed times, you're called to come out corporately and meet together. So the application of this, of course, would be that you set aside the Shabbat. At your level of faith, when you're able to do whatever you can do, you begin to take that ground and stand your ground. Don't retreat. If anything, you're going to increase that from time to time. It takes time to kind of walk into the fullness of this. But what I want to encourage you with is Isaiah 58, where God says, you know what? If you'll walk in my Shabbat, if you'll keep my Shabbat and walk within its principles, ceasing all your other activities, loving me, honoring me, spending time with me, because I want to relate to you at these unique appointed times that I've set aside. If you will walk in this, specifically the Shabbat, I will come to you and bless you and cause you to ride on the heritage of your father Jacob. Now think of that. The blessings that came to his people through Jacob, Israel itself, all the promises of God, all the covenants, all the future that's there for them. He's saying, I'm going to cause you to experience that. 6 days a week you can work, but on the seventh day, come with me. Come away with me into that secret place. 6 days a week you can camp, you can hike, you can fish, you can play sports, weddings, funerals, baby showers, birthdays, baby showers, wedding anniversaries, business seminars, build your wealth seminars. But on the seventh day, come away with me. It's my day. Make it holy unto you. It's already holy unto me. And if you will set that day apart and cease your own passions, your own pursuits, spend that time with me, I'll cause you to rise up and ride on the heritage of your father Jacob. I can tell you, I fought those battles, spent 20 years in the marketplace, 20 years working for an employer that was pretty big, 15,000 employees. They didn't want to give me Sabbath off. I had to fight those battles. They were not easy. There was a lot of fear, of losing my job. My wife was concerned. My parents were concerned. My friends were concerned. What are you doing? You can't tell them that. You're going to get fired. Who's going to pay the bills then? I even had a manager tell me, look, Mark, I get it that you're religious. I get it that you go to a great church, and that the pastor's teaching you that you shouldn't work on the Sabbath, but is your pastor going to pay your mortgage? Is the pastor going to pay for your groceries and your electricity? You need to think through this. You have a wife. You have a daughter. You need to think through this, young man. Like I didn't? Like that was the first time someone said that to me? For years, my friends had been telling me that. My parents had been telling me that. All this pressure on me. And I had to make a decision. Am I going to keep the Shabbat or just cave and let the employer control my life? Now, I had already crossed that bridge. I had already made up my mind. And so I told that person the day, I said, look, I understand where you're coming from. And no, my pastor's not going to pay my bills. But God is my provider. And he's the one that's called me to take this day off. It's not my day anyway. It's his day. And so you know what? Whatever happens, happens. If I'm supposed to keep my job, no one's going to take it from me. And if I'm going to lose my job, I can't do anything to keep it anyway. But I'm going to take this day. I'll give you 6 days a week, any schedule, do any job you want me to do. I'll be your best employer, employee. I'll just do everything I can to make you successful. But I'm not going to give you this day. And so, you know what? We went through those battles, and they tried to fire me several times, and it failed every time. And every time it failed, over 20 years, it didn't all come at once. I had to fight these battles when we got new managers, and it would take months on end because you have to go through due process, and they got to do write-ups and suspensions. And so I had this drama. It made my life really exciting. It was a very exciting journey, And I felt like on the micro, on that micro level, I felt a little bit like a Moses and a Pharaoh, God says, let my people go, you got to let me go and worship on Shabbat, It's so funny. But at the time it wasn't, and it was very frightening. But I stood my ground, had a great community to support me, and fought those battles, and won every time it got to termination. We won the case, and I kept my job. And then the most amazing thing happened. I ended up having an opportunity to go into ministry full time, and I did. I jumped at that. I took a wage cut to begin with, lost all my benefits, but I took the harvest, which at that time had become quite small because the pastor was already transitioning it into a Messianic community. So I took that and ran with it, and God so blessed me over the years that I ended up leading an incredibly beautiful congregation, the Harvest. And my wife and I have led for over 25 years now this community, and God has filled my life with so much blessing. And so if there's one thing that I want to encourage you with today, as you're coming into this faith walk with Jesus, as you're following Jesus, and you're beginning to look at the Sabbath as a day of rest and convocation, that we will help you, we will support you, and you just hang on, pray that God will give you what you need to make that transition so that you can keep the Shabbat. And I know that God will bless you. His word is true. If you will honor me, I will honor you. And God has done that in my life. In fact, I can tell you this. Lots of friends over the years, all of them tell me you're crazy and why are you doing this and you're under grace and it doesn't matter what day you worship on. Why would you jack your career? Yeah, my career didn't get jacked at all. It blossomed and flourished. I've excelled all of my friends in terms of my life and my blessing and the quality of my life is just amazing. And who would have guessed that? Who would have guessed that? You know? No one. And I want to tell you right now, it's counterintuitive, but God's ways are the very things that will bring the blessings into your life. The devil's a liar. He'll lie to you and say, no, it'll jack your life. It's the opposite. It's what's going to bring the blessing. All right, so 24 hours, rest, study, worship, fellowship, food and wine, make it a big deal. It's that day you get to spend with your family and with your God. I can tell you, my girls growing up in our house, every week they knew Fridays Dad was home early. They knew Friday we're going to have our best meal. Friday night we're going to light candles. We're going to eat the best food. We're going to drink the best wine. Why they would drink grape juice, I would get the best wine. We'd buy them the best grape juice, by the way. Anyway, so, but they knew that. They counted on it every week. There was stability. There was structure. And every week we met together around the table. We all went to bed early. We all got up. We always went to church. We had lots of friends that we established in our church, you know. And so that thing brought so much structure and solidarity to our family. It was one of the very things that helped my daughters stay the course. And now our family, we look back at them, we're so blessed. We're saying, God, you're so good. Your ways safeguard the blessings in our lives. So I encourage you to focus on that as you continue to walk into this beautiful experience of Shabbat keeping. Number 3, devoted to share meals. So meals together, as I said, they just are great experiences that help build relationships. I'm going to encourage you to do that. I'm going to encourage you to think through changing your schedules. Now, I tell you the easiest way to do it, and that it works for most people, not everybody, but since it's Shabbat and you can't do anything anyway, Friday night's a good night to invite people over. Or Saturday night after church. That's a good night to invite people over. Now, I was savvy when I was young, because when you're young, you're pretty bold, I guess. But I used to invite myself over to people's houses on Friday or Saturday, you know? I did. I would go over to the pastor's house. It's so funny. I would drive over to the pastor's house after church because I had a friend that lived next door to him. And I would sit in my car with my wife in front of my friend's house, but I wouldn't get out of my car. I'd just kind of sit there. And then inevitably, they'd look out the window, you know, because their window was open, their front window. They'd see us. We kind of like wave. And we'd just wait there a little bit. And sure enough, they'd come out. Hey, what are you guys doing? No, not much. We're just thinking of going to my friend's house. I don't know, though. Well, you want to come in and get a bite to eat? Yeah, okay, we'll come in. I used to do that a lot. And then after a while, they knew what I was doing, so they would always invite us in. But I want to encourage you to do this. Invite people over on a Friday night, once a month. Once a month. Schedule it. Do it on purpose. Invite somebody in our community that you want to get to know a little bit better. Invite them over. Share a meal. Have them bring something so that you're not cooking for everyone, right? Or Saturday night. But invite someone over. Eat with them. Share your stories. Build some relationship. And this community will get tighter and more healthy We need to schedule those times. They will not happen on their own. And then finally, and I've got booklets that I'm going to put up for everyone. You can get those, download those, that have some liturgy, candle lighting, and some prayers that you can do. That's always so meaningful, especially in a group. It's a great icebreaker, too, with new people. It's just fun to do. I'll get you those as well, and you'll have a great time. And then finally, devoted to prayer. Prayer changes things. James 5:16, at slide 52. James 5:16 says, the prayer of a righteous person has great power as it is working. Prayer changes things. Always look for the opportunity to pray for one another. So during the evening when we light candles, I always ask people, so what's going on? Is there something we can pray about, and ask God for on your behalf? And then pray and know that as you pray, heaven is listening. Heaven is assembling. Heaven is beginning to interact to actually move in a powerful way through those prayers. You have the ears of God in Messiah. You have God's attention. So use that to pray for one another. James 5:17, Elijah was a man with a nature like ours, and he prayed fervently that it might not rain. And for 3 years and 6 months, it did not rain on the earth. Are you catching that? He prayed, don't let it rain. And all throughout the land where he was living, no rain. Think about that, no rain for 3 years and 6 months. That is phenomenal. I think to myself all the time of our national problems. And I hear the Father saying, if you will pray fervently into these areas, I'll bring that to pass. I'm never overwhelmed with numbers. I don't care, what the odds are and how many people stand against us. Just our prayers alone, more than enough to overcome the many and their wicked agendas to take our nation and our families down. We hold the keys. Not only change our nation, but the nations around us. We are kings and priests. We have the authority of our Father in heaven through his Son to be the game changers in our nation. Isn't that exciting? James 5:18. Then he prayed again, and heaven gave rain, and the earth bore its fruit. So, in closing, I want to say this. A lot of opportunities to pray in this place. We have prayer teams. They meet twice a month. Don't take them for granted. If you need something, if you're hurting, if you're confused, whatever, and you need some prayer, those prayer teams, they will love on you. They will build you up. Always come and get prayer. You want to pray for others? Talk to my wife. Get some training. Jump on a prayer team and pray effectively for other people as well. We have intercession every Shabbat, 11 a.m. to 11:30. I know a lot of people are doing a lot of different things trying to get ready for the day. Let me tell you something. There's an opportunity to come and pray and intercede for this community. I'm there most of the time. I love it. We change things in our intercession in the mornings. So I encourage you, come on down and pray with us. I think you'll find it a pleasant time, a very spiritual time. So in closing, I want to say, God bless you and your families. May God's presence follow you this week and give you favor. May our faith just rise up, and may we gather together and unite and build a relationship like never before. God bless you and your loved ones. Shabbat shalom.
On this time. All right. Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, this is the way you shall bless the children of Israel. Say to them, may Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May Yahweh lift his countenance upon you and give you peace." And we add, in the name of Yeshua our Messiah, the Prince of Peace, and so they shall put my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them. Receive now the name of Yahweh. Yahweh, vayishmareha. Ya'er Yahweh panav alecha veyichunecha. Yiseh Yahweh panav alecha vayaschem lecha shalom. B'shem Yeshua HaMashiach. Shalom. Shabbat shalom.